We are reading from The Rape of the Mind by Juice Merleau. We are in Chapter 1, and this is video number 2. Mental Coercion and Enemy Occupation. Those of us who lived in the Nazi-occupied countries during the Second World War learned to understand only too well how people could be forced into false confessions and into betrayals of those they loved. I myself was born in the Netherlands and lived there until the Nazi occupation forced me to flee. In the early days of the occupation, when we heard the first eyewitness descriptions of what happened during Nazi interrogations of captured resistance workers, we were frightened and alarmed. The first aim of the Gestapo was to force prisoners under torture to betray their friends and to report new victims for further torture. The brown shirts demanded names and more names, not bothering to ascertain whether or not they were given falsely under the stress of terror. I remember very clearly one meeting held by a small group of resistors to discuss the growing fear and insecurity. Everybody at that meeting could expect to be mentioned and picked up by the Gestapo at some time. Should we be able to stand the Nazi treatment, or would we also be forced to become informers? This question was being asked by anti-Nazis in all the occupied countries. During the second year of the occupation, we realized that it was better not to be in touch with one another. More than 2 contacts were unsafe. We tried to find medical and psychiatric preventatives to harden us against the Nazi torture we expected. As a matter of fact, I myself conducted some experiments to determine whether or not narcotics would harden us against pain. However, the results were paradoxical. Narcotics can create pain insensitivity, but their dulling action at the same time makes people more vulnerable to mental pressure. Even at that time we knew, as did the Nazis themselves, that it was not the direct physical pain that broke people, but the continuous humiliation and mental torture. One of my patients, who was subjected to such an interrogation, managed to remain silent. He refused to answer a single question, and finally the Nazis dismissed him. But he never recovered from this terrifying experience. He hardly spoke even when he returned home. He simply sat, bitter, full of indignation, and in a few weeks he died. It was not his physical wounds that killed him, it was the combination of fear and wounded pride. We held many discussions about ways of strengthening our captured underground workers or preventing them from final self-betrayal. Should some of our people be given suicide capsules? That could only be a last resort. Narcotics, like morphine, give only a temporary anesthesia and relief. Moreover, the enemy would certainly find the capsules and take them away. We had heard about German attempts to give cocaine and amphetamine to their air pilots for use in combat exhaustion. But neither medicament was reliable. These drugs might revive the body by making it less sensitive to pain, but at the same time they dulled the mind. If captured members of the underground were to take them, as experiments had shown, their bodies might not feel the effects of physical torture, but their lazy minds might turn them into easier dupes of the Nazis. We also tried systematic exercises in mental relaxation and auto-hypnosis comparable with yogi exercises in order to make the body more insensitive to hunger and pain. If an individual's attention is fixed on the development of conscious awareness of automatic body functions, such as breathing, the alert functioning of the brain cortex can be reduced, and awareness of pain will diminish. This state of pain insensitivity can sometimes be achieved through auto-hypnotic exercises. But very few people of our people were able to bring themselves into such anesthesia. Finally, we evolved this simple psychological trick. When you can no longer outwit the enemy or resist talking, the best thing to do is to talk too much. This was the idea. Keep yourself sullen and act the fool. Play the coward and confess more than there is to confess. Later we were able to verify that this method was successful in several cases. Scatterbrained simpletons confuse the enemy much more than silent heroes whose stamina was finally undermined in spite of everything. I had to flee Holland after a policeman warned me that my name had been mentioned in an interrogation. I had twice been questioned by the Nazis on minor matters and without bodily torture. When they later caught up with me in Belgium, probably as the result of a betrayal, I had to undergo a long initial examination in which I was beaten, fortunately not too seriously. The interview had started pleasantly enough. Apparently the Nazi officer in charge thought he would be able to get information out of me through friendly methods. Indeed, we even had a discussion, since I am a psychiatrist, about the methods used in interrogation. But when he found that the friendly approach was getting him nowhere, the officer's mood changed, and he behaved with all the sadistic characteristics we had come to expect from this type. Happily, I managed to escape from Belgium that very night before a more systematic and more torturous investigation could begin. Arriving at the London headquarters after an adventurous trip through France and Spain, I became chief of the psychological department of the Netherlands forces in England. In this official position, I was able to gather data on what was happening to the millions of victims of Nazi terror and torture. Later on, I questioned and treated several escapees from internment and concentration camps. These people had become real experts in suffering. The variety of human reactions under these infernal circumstances taught us an ugly truth. The spirit of most men can be broken. Men can be reduced to the level of animal behavior. Both torturer and victim finally lose all human dignity. My government gave me the power to investigate a group of traitors, and I also interrogated imprisoned Nazis. When I review all these wartime experiences, all the confusion about courage and cowardice, treason, morale, and mental fortitude, I must confess that my eyes were only really opened after a study of the Nuremberg trials of the Nazi leaders. These trials gave us the real story of the systematic coercive methods used by the Nazis. At about the same time, we began to learn more about the perverted psychological strategy Russia and her satellites were using. Okay, I'll end it right there. That was video number 2 of chapter 1. We are reading from The Rape of the Mind, The Psychology of Thought Control, Menticide, and Brainwashing by Just A.F. Merleau. See you in the next video, video number 3.